Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have two very special guests back on. I think this is like our third or fourth roundtable. These are always super fun and have a couple topics that I bring, and then I feel like I let Bryan and Jordan go on a little tangent on some of these. But the last one we had, I think, was episode 510 back in October. So it's been a little while since we've all been on here. Bryan, you were just recently on the podcast a couple weeks ago. We do care about you, but we're just a little bit more interested in what Jordan's been up to. And then obviously if there's anything on your end, but we'll start with Jordan and then we'll go to Bryan there.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. What's up, guys? What's up with me? Nothing crazy. I'm racing in a 10K this weekend. Still lifting. We'll do a couple lifting updates, I'm sure. We're going to talk a little volume stuff. So I'll save a bit of training stuff to share there, but still going strong. Similar programming, 3 days running, 3 days lifting, probably 3 by 45 minutes of each thing per week. Lifting maybe a smidge under that. Just really enjoying it all. I feel like in a good spot. I feel like it's just like a nice distribution of things. Lifting's been not so much that I dread it, but not so little that I feel like it's unproductive. So it feels like a nice sweet spot there. Running's been getting better. No real injuries or anything. Just feeling in a nice cruise control spot.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's a good spot to be in. Yeah, 3 days a week. You said three of each, right? Three running, right?
Yeah.
Are you doing any like cross training or is it just running at this point?
It's just running, and I had a little bit of like a little glute pain. And so I was just like, that was mostly from training for 800 meters and doing a ton of sprint work. And it just really aggravated like glute ham connection there. But transitioning back to just like a more regular distribution of intensity running wise, just got rid of that 99%. But I was talking about to my coach, just about, oh shit, am I going to have to stop running and start doing some sort of cross training or whatever? And I was like, so let's just do alternative methods that aren't that first. And so I was like, all right, let's just go to just a little bit more moderate intensity running. And that really did clean it up. But it was funny, Bryan, because I said to Alex, I said, okay, my guess is that this is just like overuse, and overuse is a broad term of just not recovering appropriately and stressing that thing out a lot, right? And I was like, all right, if you're going to tell me we need to get off running for a tiny bit, maybe even just like a little bit, like 1 day of non-running, I was like, I don't know if I have it in me to just go pedal on something. I was like, I'm just going to need to be equally competitive with whichever other modality we get. And so I was like shopping Wahoo kickers, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to be biking now. I was like, I guess I'm going to bike now. I just don't know if I have it in me I do have it in me. That's stupid. But I just was like, if Alex was going to tell me, hey dude, we're going to take away one of your runs and you're going to do 60-minute zone 2 on the air bike, I was going to be like, nah, we're going to get into road biking. And I'm going to just be like equally annoyingly into this for no apparent reason whatsoever. But it didn't come to that yet, but it will come to that. I told him at some point, just for fun. So yeah.
Yeah, the nice thing about that though is that you can bike year round almost in North Carolina. So you don't even really have to sit on the trainer except on the days where it's raining.
Yeah, road biking is interesting. I wish we had better engineering for it. I wish we had better just structures in place, just like bike paths at all. Yeah.
It is dangerous. Bryan, you obviously had your injury, and then I guess maybe the Jersey area a couple months ago, a couple hockey players died. I don't know if you guys remember hearing about that. The drunk driver tried to pass somebody and hit him. So it is freaking dangerous, man.
The NHL players, man, that was a tragic story at their sister's wedding.
Yeah.
That's just awful.
Two brothers.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what I don't know if they ended up doing the wedding, but man, I just couldn't imagine what that was like.
It's just tragic. There's about one road bike death per year in Boulder area. And that's one too many, obviously. Like having some sort of barrier or structure that separates the bike lane from the road would be so rad if you could do that just ubiquitously across all roads.
Jordan, I know for you, at least in the past, I thought you did a little bit more biking. So has anything changed there with that? Is it just like now that you've gotten out and done more running, it's like, all right, this is way better than sitting on a bike? Or yeah, what's that kind of look like?
Yeah, the bike was the means to just gradually increasing volume while still doing something productive. So just like the bike was like, hey, let's get more generally cardiovascularly fit while we build up just the structures needed to actually handle 3 days of running. But running is just, and Bryan can attest, even if it has nothing to do with running, it's just being outside. So like just being outside, it's like this, you cannot peel me away from my runs, but only because they are my opportunity to be outside. It just feels like a really powerful multitask that just can't be recreated with other things that I do, right? It's just like lifting, even in my garage, the garage open versus garage closed has a different vibe. But running outside, I think I'm more excited for my runs these days, but almost entirely because I know early morning sunlight, just some of that oxytocin of breathing in the fresh air and being around the trees and exploring nature and listen to a podcast or whatever. So almost exclusively enjoying the running because it allows me to get outside. Still feeling that way. Still feeling like running is whatever. It's not a thing that I'm like, I don't get like a huge runner's high. Like I have a couple clients who are real big runners is like training for marathons and running like 5 times as much in that like 50 to 70 miles a week range. And they're like, they love that. I try and talk to them about how these like uber long runs that they want to do are like have some efficiencies tied to them. And maybe want to not do a 2.5 hour run and maybe put that volume elsewhere, whatever. And they're like, no, I love it. I'm in the zone. I have this crazy runner's high. And I'm like, dude, I do not get you. I respect you. Like, that's certainly not me. But yeah, so running is a means for getting outside. I'm sure even Bryan is just like, you're biking inside or outside. I'm sure it's not even remotely the same.
Well, that's literally why I picked up running in the last 3 months, because I can't bike inside. I just have to be outside while I'm doing it. And so I'm trying to become a runner for the cold season.
Yeah, the bike definitely inside it can, yeah, it can get boring for sure. That's all Bryan is. That's all I do right now
It'd be
is
fun watching
bike.
TV and stuff. I don't mind. There's like a way of things you can do that you can't do outside. But once you catch the outside bug, I think I was really enjoying the air bike. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jeff, but I was really enjoying the bike because I was like finding time to watch my soccer team or watch a podcast or watch a TV show or something. But the minute I caught the outside bug, I was like, oh yeah, you can't pull me away from that.
Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah, no, it is. And also, don't feel bad about cutting me off. People want to hear you guys speak anyways, and not me. They get to hear me on all the solo episodes anyway. So I think it's totally fine. Jordan, I know for you too, real quick on the running, what's like the end goal with it? Is it to do races? Are you looking for improvements in any metrics, anything like that? Or yeah.
Any goal I am giving myself is just entirely to wrap it up in fun. And my ultimate goal is like recently reconnected with the fact that this is not a woe is me comment at all. I just do not. I'm just like, please don't take it that way. But I've just reconnected with the fact that I'm a homozygous ApoE4 carrier. And so I don't know, we don't need to get super nerdy about that, but it's basically 2 copies of a certain gene that makes you like 15 times more likely to get Alzheimer's, like 12 times more likely to get cardiovascular disease. It's like the worst it's like the worst pair of genes you can have in terms of neurodegenerative disease and cardiovascular disease. Basically, if you had to boil down what to do about that, is just to keep your ApoB as low as possible, which was like, there's podcasts about it where people are like unsure if they should even tell people to go get genetic testing because it doesn't actually change what you should be doing ultimately. Like the 3 of us have the same goal if we want to avoid heart disease, like one of which is keep ApoB low, but just recently reconnected with that and just had a little bit of a mindset shift of plus I have asthma. And so from a respiratory perspective and from a cardiovascular health perspective, I'm like 2 steps behind. And so have recently been thinking, yeah, I'm going to need to do this for the rest of my life in some way and stay. I've always thought if I had one day of working out and you had to ask me, should I do my lifting or my cardio? Like aesthetically and enjoyment wise, it's the lifting. But if I had to pick not for the rest of my life in some weird heuristic or some weird hypothetical we don't actually have to do. But yeah, just been feeling more of a burden to, okay, I really got to stay in good cardiovascular shape. And yeah, running, ultimately my goal is to touch every distance at least once and just learn from what it takes to train for that stuff and just make it fun. And then I don't know if I'll catch let's go through them all again and beat all my numbers bug, but I'm a 10K and a marathon away from everything from an 800 to a marathon. And maybe at post marathon, there's some sort of ultra in my life, and only for the purpose of wrapping it up in fun to keep doing it. I don't think everybody is wired that way. I'm not wired that way for other activities. I just happen to be wired that way for cardio, which we've talked about before. It's just like something I don't necessarily love doing in the moment, but putting that sort of a goal on it, being lost in some of the learning. I'll wake up 6 months later. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't missed a workout in 6 months because I've just been immersed in the learning alongside of what's going on. So yeah, that's how I make it just fun enough to keep doing it.
That makes sense. It's fun. You're getting outside and then also doing all those things too. And in turn, that's going to lead to improvements in all those metrics anyways. So it's keeping it fun. And then also, did you get a genetic test done to find that?
I got a genetic test done. And then I had Alan Flanagan on the podcast a little while ago to talk about some of this lean mass hyperresponder stuff. And him and I have just been corresponding a little bit. He put out I subscribe to his like community or whatever. He puts out like deep dives. He just did a deep dive on ApoE4. So it just came back into my mind. And I messaged him. I was like, yeah, I tagged him in a picture. I was like, oh, as a homozygous ApoE4, I was like, I really appreciate this. And he messaged me, he's like, yo, you're homozygous ApoE4. And I was like, yeah. He's like, oh shit. I was like, yeah. I was like, it's 1% of the population. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, bro. I was like, yeah, it's okay. It's not like a big deal. But it does make sense. Alzheimer's is like rampant in my dad's side of the family. Is rampant, just everyone. And so that does track. Your question about genetic testing, yes, long time ago I did Inside Tracker, maybe it was, or something like that. I don't know if it's Inside Tracker or DNA Fit. There you go. Many years ago. And that was just like basically the only take home that I had from it.
Yeah, man. The genetic side, that's tough. Like you said, you can only really do the things that you can focus on. Some people are just going to be at a higher risk of that in general. Do either of you guys get your blood work done regularly?
Yeah, I get every 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, tell me how you do that though, because tell me how from what I know, you have like, I haven't had a doctor in 10 years.
Me neither.
My first doctor appointment in 10 years. I had to book it friggin' I'm not bitching about the healthcare system right now, but it was like, I was like, oh, finally, I have health insurance. My wife, we have health insurance. Not anymore, ironically. She's at home, but the first appointment was like fucking 4 months out. And so I'm like, great. I kind of wanted to just pay $500 for Marek, but I was like, don't be dumb. Do you have a friend who like you can go every 4 to 6 months? It's easy. Can you guys both talk to me about your experience with your doctors? I would love to get blood work every 6 months. Are doctors cool with you doing that, even if you don't have real risk factors?
I have a guy who used to follow or still follows Evolved, who's a doctor, and basically was like, "Hey, I like Peter Attia's work, and I know you've been talking a lot about him, so I'm starting this Peter Attia like clinic. I can be your doctor." And I was like, "That's dope." So he basically just all we've done so far is when I tell him I want blood work, he just orders me blood work and then I go do it. But I pay for it out of pocket, so it's
Yeah.
not like it's covered by insurance blood work. I pay $271 and I get the full panel of everything that I would want, that he would want, and we monitor them. And I just do that every 4 to 6 months.
What are some things in that blood work that you get that you find? Are you like, is there ApoB, LP little a? Are you like getting an omega-3 index? What are you getting?
Yeah, all of that stuff. The LP little a we only did once because you only need to do it once. But yeah, all of those, the omega-3 index for sure. Like I'm huge on that one,
No,
trying to get that number up. It's all of like kind of some of those nuanced ones that you would want in there, as well as all the major metabolic panel and that sort of stuff, the hormone panel.
For you, is there anything that you needed to work on or anything like that? Or anything that was like, hey, maybe you need to focus on this kind of nutrient or supplement or anything like that over the last couple that you've taken? Or just in general too?
Yeah, I'm pretty good overall for the most part. I actually wouldn't say that there's like a single category that is extremely worried about. I have the typical ALT, AST like liver enzymes being around 30 or slightly under, which the range is 20 to 40, so you don't really want to be there, but you also have a semi-compromised liver response just because you have muscle mass and you eat a lot of protein and stuff. So like that one, and then same with creatinine and bun and the different ones for the kidneys. So I've been doing the C-statin C blood test, which takes away the fact that you're on creatine or that you have a lot of muscle mass. And that one is still slightly high. So I think if there's one that is like my only concern really is the C-statin C and that the kidney range is like on the high side of normal and everything else is pretty good. Insulin's great. My glucose is great. All my ApoB and LDL stuff is great as well.
So what do you have to do with that? The one that was a little high there, accounting for the creatine and
Yeah, the
muscle.
kidney one. I don't really know. I don't really know. None of the things that I'm doing that are bad should be affecting that specifically. Like the things that I do that are bad should be affecting some other markers that they're not. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. We're just keeping an eye on it and making sure it doesn't go any higher.
Yeah, I know too. Did they tell you to not train and take supplements like a couple days before as well too with that?
Yeah, that's the I never do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, they say that you're supposed to not lift weights for 3+ days before, and you're not supposed to really do any cardio even up to the day before. Give 2 or 3 days for that. And I've never done that. The only thing I've done, the closest I've gotten is I've 2 days without lifting, and I did cardio only one day prior. So it was, yeah, I don't know. You can't get me to take a week off of training just so that I can get blood work. To
Yep.
me, I want the blood work that exemplifies or represents the way that I normally am on a
Yeah, it
day-to-day
makes sense.
basis, not the blood work that's like in a perfect world when you don't work out. This is what your blood work looks like.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And then I know too, like some other obviously, I know for you, I don't feel like you're in a deficit as much anymore, but obviously being in a deficit and stuff like that could probably alter some of that as well too. So I don't know if you account for any of that or if you're just like, hey, whatever time of year it is, I'm just going to do it and just stay consistent with the 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, I haven't been in a deficit for a long time, but there are certain markers that change when you're in a deficit that you would expect to see on a normal basis.
Yeah. How's your back?
Yeah, that's pretty much going to be my only update is that it's feeling better. I would say at this point it's probably 85 or 90%. I still feel the same as I did before, though, that I don't really see a reason to throw in heavy hip hinges back into my life anytime in the near future. And I'll probably just stick with 45-degree hip extensions, weighted, and seated leg curls for my posterior chain work, and then lunges, split squats, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think I'll be doing any heavy hip hinging because even though that wasn't what caused the injury, it's still something that has been problematic for me in the past. And given I just don't care enough at this point. I don't think the benefit is large enough for me to continue doing something that causes me low back discomfort at times.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, just weighing the cost benefit analysis of it, and for you it's just not worth it at this point. So cool. I guess too, one thing that I haven't talked with either of you about, you guys have any big goals for 2025 or anything like that? Training, fitness? Bryan, I don't think we touched on this on the last pod. Maybe we did, but do you guys have any big goals from like a fitness perspective or just life or anything like that for 2025? Jordan, you go first.
Yeah, I'll probably do the cliche marathon. I think that's probably going to be a thing I'll just feel inclined to do at some point next along the path of where I've been going, and just try and do all of this without losing muscle mass. That's really the goal. I have no interest in trading in that direction. So the reason I've avoided doing marathon training is because it's just a little bit more time intensive. I say a little bit, depends on who you ask, a little bit to a lot of it, but that you're not required to do a air quote long run where you're going out for 14 to 22 miles. Like, you're not required to do that, but that's like commonplace, and that's like several hours on the weekend, and I just haven't felt I've been in a place where I wanted to devote that much time on the weekend, which for me is like really just important family time. But I think what I spoke with my coach about doing is, hey, can we buck that trend of, because there's some reasons that the fabled long run is unnecessary. It's a little nuance there. Anyway, I'm going to try and do it without that sort of fabled 2.5 hour, 3 hour run on the weekend for that exact reason. But yeah, that's probably it. But again, without losing muscle, continuing to push some things within training, and yeah, just enjoying that.
Are you like in that plan, this hypothetical plan that you put together for the marathon, would you have one run at some point before the marathon that goes up to 60% of the distance?
Yeah, so there's two things to think about. There's physiologically the benefit from workouts, but then also just the effect on the athlete, the psychological, the knowledge gains, the experience gains, those intangibles. So like realistically, the biggest benefit of the long run is those specificity of what do I do with my brain for 3 hours, keeping cadence, falling in and out of associative and dissociative tactics of like really focusing on my breathing and each step and feeling the earth, to like listening to a podcast for 45 minutes and being able to dissociate from what I'm doing. But the actual physiological benefits, just like everything, the SFR gets worse over time. And once you're north of the 2 hour range between cardiac drift, to maintain that pace, you end up working a little bit harder. It's the same with lifting. It's like at some point there's a per session volume where you should pack it up, go home, come back for another day for another hard workout. The difference, of course, is that you're competing in an event that allows you where you ultimately have to be doing, let's say, all of that per session volume in a single session. But my goal will be to do as little of that as possible. Brian, to answer your question, is to say I want to only feed my experience as little. I had two clients who ran the New York City Marathon recently, and both of them, I had long conversations about this, not to convince them, but both of them absolutely 100% for their own mental health wanted to run a full marathon distance before doing the marathon. Now, I can understand the logic of that. It's up against it. Just like that run sets you back a few days of fatigue. And again, a few days of fatigue versus I now know going into it what I'm exactly in for. I see the understanding of that. And so you're right, Brian. I think at some point I'll want to experience at least a few hours on my feet. So I don't know exactly what that upper end mileage will be, but I'll tell you my goal will be to keep it as low as possible, to try and aim for what would be physiologically optimal while feeding my need to know what it would feel like to be out there for X hours as little as possible. But I'm sure I'll want to breach the 15-mile range maybe, but getting up to like the 21, most marathon programs have you do the 22 miler at some point. And I just think that's fine, by the way, fine. Just like doing a X amount of volume is probably fine too. But for me on an individual level, I'm like, all right, maybe we call it at 15 and I have an extra run later in the day. Plus, one of the things, we can stop talking about running so much, but is I just got a running stroller. First of all, I asked if people got running strollers, and I can talk to two other dads who pseudo running cardio buffs. And I probably got 1,000 DMs, 1,998 of them said Bob's. I said, which running stroller should I get? I don't know who Bob is, by the way. Bob has a chokehold on the running stroller business. Everyone said Bob's. I looked them up. They're like $700. Wow. I'm like, 998 of you guys are spending. So got one on Facebook Marketplace, #deal. And then #lowballing everybody on Facebook Marketplace till somebody said yes. And then it's awesome. It's the most amazing thing ever. My daughter loves it. And so my plan would be to like microdose, or my plan has been microdosing a little zone 2 with her. I don't do any direct zone 2 running. And so I was like, every day we've been going out for a 15-minute zone 2 run. And that has downsides you're aware of. just like the time it takes to get heart rate up, and no problem. It's still additive. It's still a nice time with my daughter, and it can grow as she gets more tolerant in the stroller for longer. So I'm looking forward to that becoming a couple times a week, 20, 30 minutes, a little zone 2, nice and easy. It's been a lot of fun. I can see why people use those strollers.
Man, what a nice little niche market to get into, man. You don't even think about little stuff like that. So off that, I don't know, Brian, do you have any questions on the running side? If not,
I don't really have any goals, so to speak, either. Like I'll probably do a bike race at some point, and it's cool that I've been running enough now that the other day I ran 3 miles in 31 minutes in zone 2. And so that was surprising to have moved my zone 2 pace down from like 11:30 to 10 or whatever that is. That was cool. So I'll just continue to try and be okay at running and enjoy biking. And yeah, I don't know. That's really all I got. Try to maintain muscle mass, get stronger, and keep experimenting with taking volumes down, which I know is one of the conversation topics for today. So maybe I can transition you right into that.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I love it. I love the natural.
Well, do you want to frame it? Do you want to?
Yeah, first I did want to chat with you guys about like just volume changes like over a lifting career, and then we can talk about like how low we can go with that volume over time. Is this something that you do think like it's natural? Are you going to see volume changes over a lifting career? Does it go up? Does it go down? Does it depend on a few things? I just wanted to chat about what that looks like, and then yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, Jordan and I actually did a full podcast episode on Jordan's channel where we made little graphs and we showed them to the camera and we talked about what happens to volume over a training age. That was super fun. And I think that we both, for the most part, align with this idea that the intermediate phase is probably the point where your volume is the highest. And in the beginning, you don't need that much volume because you're a beginner and you grow from anything. And then you become an intermediate and you need to do more. You're experimenting a bit. You're able to create a stimulus. Your form is getting better so you don't get injured from doing all the volume. And then you become advanced and you learn that you can go really deep into certain movements and get way more out, and you become interested in the biomechanics and in each muscle receiving this extremely direct stimulus. And volume tends to then go down a little bit into the advanced stage. And this would be the optimal curve versus kind of the curve of where Jordan and I are right now.
And with that, so obviously one of the big things being you get better at volume over time, but I would imagine too, that also is going to come down to how far you want to take it with it as well too. Again, maybe there's periods of time, even when you're advanced, where you might have it be a little bit higher for whatever reason, or do you think that would never be the case with that either?
No, I think that it depends what your objective is and what stage of caloric manipulation you're in. If you're in a surplus and you're trying to specialize on a muscle group, there's no reason you couldn't push sets super high for one or two muscle groups at a time and have it lower on maintenance for some other muscle groups, which we've talked about a bunch on your podcast prior, and building specialization cycles and stuff. But I think that once you get to the point as an advanced athlete, where an advanced trainee, where you can go there and you can get so much out of each set, it seems crazy to think that you could do 20 sets for your quads. I just don't know very many advanced guys that are training within 0 to 2 RI that are doing 20 sets for their quads, but you see a lot of intermediates doing that. And so I think that there's something to that. Anecdotally, that curve makes sense both in anecdote and in kind of practical application.
I know.
Go ahead.
Jordan, you go, man. You go ahead.
I'm interested if anybody would amend what I'm about to say. So I would say that the stimulus required for a minimum effective dose of hypertrophy, so stimulus, not sets, but stimulus probably goes up forever, right? Like the stimulus needed for any adaptation probably just goes up linearly as you gain more of the adaptation that comes from that stimulus. You just need more caffeine over time. You need more drugs over time. You need more stimulus to keep getting an adaptation. What Brian is saying is very astute, which is, while that might be true, and I'm open to you guys saying, actually, I'm not sure if that's true, but for my argument, I'll say that is true, that the stimulus required to get a minimum effective dose of hypertrophy goes up over time forever. I don't know if it's linearly, let's just assume it just goes up. Like you need more stimulus over time to grow. But if you were to actually layer on top of that, let's say linear upward graph of stimulus, what you find is that you get so much better at extracting more stimulus per set that the actual sets required to continue to get more and more stimulus actually goes down at a certain inflection point and probably levels off at some point. And so, yes, you might need more stimulus over time, but over time you get more stimulus per set, such that set numbers at some point probably come down. Not only does the amount you can do, not only does what you get out of each set go up, so your your stimulus per set goes up, but your recoverability per set goes down. And those two things are intertwined, obviously, because you're so strong and everything is just a little bit more fatiguing, and you are extracting more stimulus per set. So by definition, they're also going to be a bit more fatiguing. So I think that the net is that, yeah, what's the more helpful thing to communicate? It's probably the set number stuff, because I think just an underlying understanding of physiology would say that to get more of an adaptation, you continue to need more and more stimulus. But we aren't underlying physiology. We're like people in the gym doing sets. And so I think at a certain point, I agree with 100% with Bryan. What we are like, if you show me a program with 25 working sets in a day, I know one of three things. I know you're either very far from failure, you're a newbie / intermediate, or they're just very low fatigue, low stimulative exercises to begin with. You're doing like band work and it's like foofy stuff that's not super stimulative anyway. So one of those things has to be true for you to accomplish survival of 25 working sets in a single day, let alone doing that multiple days per week, which highlights if we get people close enough to failure. And if we're talking intermediate / advanced, then chances are you're advanced when you look at that workout and you're like, no freaking way. I think that's just like an intuitive. People are like, when am I in advance? I'm like, yeah, when you look at 9 working sets in a day and you're like, shit, like that's gonna be tough. That's when you're training. I don't want to be like, that's when you're training hard, like some sort of training hard gatekeeper, but like that is a moment where, I watched it happen. I'm sure you've watched it in Paragon, Bryan, where like people will question the volume in the beginning. And then 6 months later, they're like, darn, we have 7 working sets on a leg day. I'm like, I can't believe it. And I'm like, yep, you have upped your intensity game and obviously maybe potentially also gotten a lot stronger.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I agree 100% with literally everything you said.
And I'm sure too, like over time, you start to find out what exercises give you that good stimulus as well too, and you get that part dialed in as well too, and that is obviously going to go into the stimulus talk as well. And again, from a biomechanics standpoint, figuring out the exact technique that works for you too to get a little bit more out of it. I was going to say too, Bryan, I know since working with you, I feel like when I first started, it's funny because I knew this going in. That's how I felt like even before working with you is you probably need a lot less volume than you think. But then going and working with you, you'd like to do 2 sets. And I was used to 3, 4, 5+ sets. And again, we usually start out at 2. And again, depending on like rest pause, stuff like that, it may go up. But I feel like even now, man, like 2, I'm like, by the end of 2, I'm like, holy shit, like I'm done with this. I'm even thinking back how I used to do 3 all the time. I'm like, I don't know how I did that. And so I don't know if that is just the same thing. It's like you just continue to build off of that over time. Or if you have found, again, the right exercises for me there, or maybe I was just sandbagging it a little bit and just doing maybe a little bit too much volume and that in turn watered down each set there.
Yeah, I think that just happens subconsciously. If you see on your program that you have 4 or 5 sets of an exercise, you're not going to give everything that you have to the first set. It just doesn't make sense, and we don't do that. When you have 2 sets, you can it's like the perfect number, because the first set you go super hard and you're like, man, that was really good. Like I probably am good right now. I don't think I need the second set. And then you rest for 2 or 3 minutes and you're like, yeah, I could probably do one more. And you get back in there and you do one more and you're just like, yeah, that's good now. I definitely don't need any more. And I think 2 is the right number for that reason, with 1 sometimes being the right number depending on the exercise and its placement in your program.
The ultimate bro mansplaining podcast thing is to like whip out some obscure law about the universe that you like happen to know about, but I'm going to do it anyways. You guys are familiar with Parkinson's law, which is like work expands the time given. This is how I feel about sets as well. If you have 5 sets, like your work will expand, your effort will expand to meet the 5 sets and condense to the 2 sets. And I'm not saying that means that 5 sets at couple RIR and 2 sets of complete failure are totally the same in terms of stimulus, but I am saying that it is a factual thing that if I give you 5 sets, you will subconsciously or consciously expand your effort to be able to survive the 5 sets. And what that means in English is that you'll try a little less hard on a couple of them, if not linearly earlier on, and try harder later. You'll save something in the tank. And yeah, what do we do with that information? We can make our programming and our articulation of effort a little bit better. We can not use so many sets. I think that's just genuinely the last couple of years where people have been moving. I think we've been moving to a little bit more higher intensity, a little bit lower volumes. I don't know if for that practical reason. I've had people, I've seen some programming. Listen, the whole gamut still exists. I join groups all the time to see what people are up to, just to learn about what other philosophies are. And I'm still seeing 5 sets of stuff. I'm still seeing 4, 5, 6 sets of stuff. I'm seeing some crazy stuff out there. And it does, I was just telling my wife, I was like, there's some crazy stuff I've seen. It's just crazy. But it does remind me that there's people in those groups making gains and still making progress. And yeah, I would have critiques. We're definitely still in that really wide bullseye when it comes to hypertrophy.
Yeah, my group programs for the most part use between 2 and 4 sets for exercises. And that's because I think for the most part, I'm targeting a general intermediate audience and you just do the best you can with what you got.
Would you say, Brian, that this, I was talking to somebody the other, actually, maybe it was in my group, but my program as it's written 10 years ago would have been a crazy low volume program. And my program today, as it's written, is a crazy high volume program. Like it's written the same, but like the pendulum has swung so far that like if you're like following hashtag optimal bros, you might join my group and be like, dude, it's a lot of volume. And if you were like deep into Dr. Mike RP stuff 5-10 years ago, you join my program and you're like, dude, mad low volume. And so just like, it's hysterical. I just felt like I've gone from defending how few sets are in the program to like realizing why you might need a second or third set sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It changes. Yeah.
I feel first, Jordan, I like the Parkinson's law there. I've never really thought about applying that to hypertrophy work. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I use regularly because I feel like people are always like, oh, I wish I had more time to do stuff. And I'm like, again, people are like, I want 25 hours in a day. I'm like, you would still find a way to fit everything into it. And then you'd wish you had another couple hours there. So I'm glad you brought that up. As far as where was I going to go with this? I wanted to take this somewhere. I guess to off of this. Okay, when we talk about the meta aggression that Josh Pellin and them had, it sounds like overall at the end of the day, the limiting factors to all this too is going to just probably be a lifestyle thing as well too, in terms of nutrition, recovery, what you can commit to it as well too. It seems like those end up being the things that kind of get in the way anyways before you can actually really push the volume from that perspective. But I feel like, and I don't know, you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like if you can do more and it's still high quality, you still would always be like, hey, let's try and get a little bit more in if that quality's there. Would you say that's true in terms of volume, or do you still think that, and again, within reason, obviously people aren't going to be able to do 60 sets per muscle group, but do you still think if you can still have that kind of high quality volume and you would still...
It's high quality volume if you're progressing with the volume. And so I think the question is, if you're progressing really well, why do you think that adding more volume will make you progress better?
I'll play the hypothetical with you. That's like saying if I'm getting a good high from 5 milligrams of THC, that I won't get higher with 8 milligrams THC. But the counter to that is probably, yeah, but at some point you bug out and you have to go to the hospital, right? And so you like wig out, you think there's cops outside your window and stuff, but like you don't necessarily know. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you basically asking the question of, hey, is it still not technically true that if you can survive, recover, adapt from more, that more grows muscle faster? I think that I do agree with that. I just don't know what I necessarily do with it. I guess I do with a client who's saying, hey, I'm surviving the program you've given me and I'm progressing well. And I'd like to make sure that I am progressing optimally. Could we try doing more, and would more give me more gains? It probably would if you can survive it. I would posit, by the way, that's my opinion personally. I wouldn't, it's mega, and if once somebody has a program written by any of the three of us, more than that, we're talking 3 or 4 days a week, more than that becomes descending into quite inefficient training. So I would obviously lead with that of, yeah, maybe technically more in a technical sense more, but in a relative sense, a pretty poor use of time. But I think if Brian, your point was like, hey, if you're progressing well, then why change anything at all? I think very practically speaking, I like that as well.
Yeah, I feel like you risk breaking positive momentum by changing the parameters. And you can obviously ramp up volume super slowly. I wouldn't be opposed to that and experimenting that with a client. I think actual margins of what you could hope to gain on top of what you were gaining is so small as to almost be like unable to be realized. So it really then just becomes a matter of, do you want to spend this extra time, this extra energy, this extra recovery resources, the extra stress on your tendons and tissues over time for what may amount to like micrograms of additional muscle mass on your body?
It depends what baseline is though. So if you have a person doing 2 times a week, my tone would be quite different.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm saying if we're already at, like you said, 3 or 4 times a week, like a standard accepted amount of volume that seems to be ubiquitously useful for most people, then for them to say, should we do more? You're already at this point that is likely the inflection point of where that asymptote really begins to flatten out.
I agree.
It sounds like what you're, again, it's okay. If you do more, then it's like you run that risk of now that's more time committing to it. And you get those kind of diminishing returns continuing to push it up in a sense, right? And you run the risk of like now doing more is going to lead to you, like you said, breaking that momentum and maybe the quality does really suffer, and then it's okay, that sucks at that point. Is that kind of what you're saying there
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that?
it could be worth experimenting. If your client is super bullish on this and really wants to experiment with increasing volumes, even though things are working, I don't think that's a bad idea. You can go one set here, one set there. Like you and I do this throughout a mesocycle. We go from 2 sets to 2 sets and a rest pause, then 2 sets and a rest pause and some partials or whatever. There are little progressions of volume that are occurring throughout the program. So I'm not against adding volume. I think that the ultimate goal, though, should be to get the best stimulus to fatigue ratio. And that, in my opinion, if progress is occurring, you're likely somewhere in that maximum adaptive volume sweet spot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think the meta regression showed that, right? As you increase volume, it's again, you're just not going to get as much. You run the risk of not getting as much, and that's more time and everything. And again, I think it's like, again, you run that risk of now the quality goes down, so then that's obviously not great. And then it comes back to what we just initially talked about. Now you're doing more volume, even though the quality is not as good per set. So you run into that issue. And I also just think that people end up running into like recovery issues, or again, or even just like you said, Bryan, not only psychological, but also wear and tear on tendons and stuff like that too, that you're not really thinking about. Again, I think those end up being the limiting factors for most people that have a normal everyday life. Obviously, we're talking, again, IFBB bodybuilders. They can probably recover because they're taking supplements, special sports supplements, and also that's all they do, is that's their main goal, which I think most people, again, can't really get to that point because all those lifestyle limiting factors. So I think we summed up kind of the volume. Again, it sounds like that intermediate's where it's going to be the highest, and then as you get more advanced and you get more out of each kind of set, it could go down over time. But as we said, you could also try and experiment with that over time too, or have specialization phases and stuff like that as you get a little bit more advanced. I think most people overestimate how advanced they are in their training. I don't know if that's something you guys commonly see as well too. People tend to overestimate where they're at on that curve as well too. I don't know if that's something you guys see or not with that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think most people seems like somewhat accurate with their assessment.
So how low can we go with volume, and what are the benefits of potentially going with like a pretty low volume approach? And again, this is all relative to, okay, what is low volume to you? Because I think, Jordan, you brought that up. Of somebody sees one program, they think it's low volume. Another person sees it, they think it's high volume. So it's really all relative to the person. How low can we theoretically go with it?
Low to go with what purpose? Like with maintenance being the objective?
Either, right? Both. Because again, I understand that those are going to be two separate conversations. Hey, are we trying to grow or are we trying to maintain? But either one, I think it'll be helpful for people to see how it could change with either one.
What do you think, Jordan?
I like to lean on 4 fractional sets. I think that's like a fine place. So 4 fractional sets, I'm not sure exactly which study that they're taking that from. That could be from the Schoenfeld 2016. That wasn't 4 fractional sets though. That was four regular sets.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we park that for just a second. That was on newbies. And so I feel like at 4 fractional sets per week, I'm not going to grow on that, but I feel very confident I could maintain on that. And I think just the fact that I've been doing that for the last couple of years. I will say that my training's got a little bit better. That initially I think I lost a bit of muscle. And I think what happened was, and not to go back to our Parkinson's law discussion, is I went from training at higher volumes and I just went to lower volumes, and I didn't compensate by pushing myself harder because I already thought I was pushing myself really hard. And so in the last maybe 6 months, I've actually seen some gains and progression, like just like progressing really well on DB presses when I was like completely felt like I had regressed and halted. And I think it's because what had happened was I lowered my volume. And I was like, oh, cool, let me flex all this lower volume stuff. And I train hard, so I'll just keep training hard. And then I realized that I wasn't doing the reverse Parkinson's law where I was like going to compensate a little bit by pushing a little harder on each set. I thought I was already doing that. And I think in the last 6 months, I've just gotten a lot more bullish on involuntary slowing of concentric rep speed and just watching my form videos back and calling myself out when I'm like, oh yeah, that's failure. It's like most of my perception of failure during the set. And then I watch the form video back. Again, I don't like doing this thing where you watch the form video back and you assume that's objectively all that counts. Like you lived the set, what was there, what you were feeling at that point, neuromuscularly, like your mindset wise, but objectively didn't really see much rep slowing at all. At least led me to believe, yeah, you maybe have more in you. And if you're going to do this low volume thing, maybe it's time for that. Yeah, anyway, I don't know where we were going with that, but 4 fractional sets, I feel like is a point where I feel very confident at my plate 15 years in, not super mega jack, but 15 years of training. I'm at a position where I would maintain, maybe grow. It wouldn't be totally out of the question to see some growth, but I feel confident that's at least the fence I'd be sitting on. I'd say that's the fence I'd be sitting on if I was like, I'll try and get a little bit of gains, but if it's just maintenance, I'm cool with it. That's where I would sit with 4 fractional sets.
So by 4 fractional sets, you mean that you have pull downs and those are just a back movement, or that those count as like 2 sets of a bicep movement?
Half for biceps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually don't train any arms at the moment, so I'm accepting that there's going to be a decrease and then probably a plateau of bicep and tricep, but I think that's already happened. I think I'm at the plateau now. But yes, fractional sets being that.
Yeah. What about you, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say 3 or 4. So I think we're like basically in the same ballpark. I know strength is not the same as size, and so we're talking about somewhat two distinct things. But my experiment this summer, where I went down to essentially 3 working sets for every muscle group on my full body training program across the week, and I was able to increase strength and on some things and maintain strength on other things, along with all of the cardio and biking that I was doing. And then now, the last 4 months or so since biking has ended, I'm at 4.5 sets per muscle group per week and continuing to see like the same type of progress as I was. So, yeah, I think it's like somewhere in that range. So much of that, though, has to do with the fact that I am where I am in my training journey and that I know how to push. And I don't know if that would be the case that I could generalize that across other populations of lifters and say you will be fine if you do 3 or 4 sets per muscle group per week. And also note that Jordan's dumbbell presses have been looking strong. I saw it on his story. Dude was using like the 80s just a few months ago and says he's did the hundreds the other day, which is
Dude, the Rogue,
epic.
I gotta email Rogue. I went home. I ran home during the holidays. I went to my old stomping grounds, picked up the hundos. Not no problem, but I was like, wow, this is great. Come home, grab the 85s, and I'm like, they're just like they're wrecking. I don't know if it's like grip or just like the length of the dumbbell or just the hex shape or just Rogue is lying or something. It's just like it was totally humbling. Came home, I was like, dude, crush the hundreds. Or the other gym, those whatever brand that was not the case. But I was like, it's probably good marketing to make them like actually a little bit lighter, and people think they're on average a little stronger. They're like, oh, when I lift those the Hampton ones, I'm really much stronger. I'm gonna go with those.
And then they have to go buy the heavier one at the next level up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you spend more money on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the rep range you have on the hundos?
I hit him for 6 on an incline, and now but I come back home and 90 for 6 is what I hit on my incline. And it's like harder, so I don't know what that's about. But yeah, 90 for 6. I'm in the. We can have a whole nother podcast, and we might be able to that of this like complete tsunami wave of Paul Carter descendants who are just saying do 1 set to failure of 10 different exercises in the 4 to 6 rep range. There's like a new kid from TikTok that pops up on my explore page every single day who's just do 10 exercises per day, 4 to 6 sets, or sorry, 4 to 6 reps to failure. It's whichever person you've seen who's like dumping on Dr. Mike lately, which by the way, like there are some fair critiques that some people have made. But if you see a TikTok kid shitting on Dr. Mike in a React video, you better believe that his next video is going to be telling you about how maximize motor recruitment at 4 to 6 reps, and you only need to do 1 working set, and that if you really train hard, that's enough. It's just like a wave of people. Brian, every single competitor of ours, Brian, in Train Heroic is just like hopping on this bandwagon of like 12 exercises, 1 working set.
Oh,
I'm
really?
like, oh, it's hysterical. It's just really,
Okay. Interesting.
it's a new wave of just do 1 working set. Now there's some merit, and we can for another day of like distribution of sets. So okay, I have 18 working sets for upper body per week. Like we talked about how 2 working sets versus 3. If you go down to 1, does that open up the door for another exercise? And
Yeah.
at what point is best pec development made with 3 sets of 3 exercises or 9 or 1 set of 9 exercises? Like where is that sweet spot of efficiency and benefit? And so I respect that there's probably just like there's diminishing return with more volume across every time scale, which is like volume within 1 exercise. So from a first set to a second set to a third set, there's volume within a session for like first exercise to second to third, the time you spend, there's volume diminishing returns for across the week, all that stuff. But I do think that's like, if I have time, if I have a client who's doing 4 exercises, 2 to 3 sets or something like that, and they're like, I have an extra 10 minutes, what should I do? Like I'm usually like, I think it's an interesting thought puzzle of what to do with those 10 minutes. Chances are it's not a third set of something you're already doing. It's a single set to failure, let's say, of something you're not doing to kind of shade in some part of that pie chart that you might not be shading in with your current exercise selection. But I don't feel the same about going from 1 set to 2 set. I think that there's probably some merit in that second set that just from an efficiency standpoint of I'm already warmed up, I'm already like neurologically primed, I'm already set up, frankly, the bench is set up, the dumbbells are here or whatever, something to talk about on a future pod, but they are coming in I think it was like the fear of TikTok getting banned that they've all come over to Instagram and they're just invading my reels. Every single one is like, 4 to 6 sets motor. They just say motor unit recruitment a lot. If you hear motor unit recruitment, that it's one of these kids like motor unit recruitment, 4 to 6 sets, 4 to 6 reps. I'm like, all right, I get it. Yeah, good. Yeah, I get it. Sets of 5 can be productive. Like I'm here, I hear you, but like you guys are, it's too many of you.
That's really interesting. I don't spend enough time in my explore page to really see much of this, but it's interesting because I do feel as if I can maximize the stimulus with one set of an exercise, but practically the idea of having to warm up another movement, set up another movement, it practically just doesn't make any sense. And so that's where the turnoff is for me, and why 2 sets I think makes the most sense, because then you're actually getting 2 for the price of 1 with that setup, and then you can go warm up a new movement, new setup, and move from there.
Agreed.
Yeah, the practicality aspect of it. I don't even know. I like some of Paul's stuff, but I haven't been like super. I don't know like what his programming looks like. So is that kind of what he's promoting as?
Depends what month it is.
I do know it's like lower rep range, like you said, like 4 to 6 reps, and then I know he was talking about like frequency, but like I said, I haven't really paid attention to that too much to know
I was
exactly.
being just that it changes all the time, but yeah, it's mostly the frequency thing. One hard set, 4 to 6 reps. Just I like what I've learned from that, from people just like fucking thinking that this is the holy grail. I like what I've learned from that. It has pushed me to try out some lower rep range on exercises that I would have previously felt like, oh, I like this in a moderate rep range. It's Bryan, you even said I was like doing sets of 5 on the behind the back lateral raise, and I was loving it. And
Yeah,
so
it's the best.
yeah,
Sets of
and
5.
I get
Yeah.
the merit of why you would do it, but I will stand firm with you need to be efficient at that movement. Otherwise, I actually find so the upside is you don't have to waste any effort on easy, non-stimulative or sub-optimally stimulative reps, right? If you're doing a set of 10, like the first 5 are like getting you to the hard part. It's like it's like racing up to the part where you're in bumper to bumper traffic. So I get it. You do a set of 5, they're all a battle. They're all really stimulative. They all get high threshold motor unit recruitment, all that good stuff. But I watch people try and do heavy sets of 5 of some of these isolation exercises, and they are not like, there's almost a benefit of having done those first 5 really good technique reps where they weren't hard yet, so that you can try and maintain that good technique into the hard ones instead of the first rep being hard. And I'm not saying people can't, that the average Joe can't come in and crush a good set of 5, but I am saying that on average, being more neurologically efficient at a movement makes you more likely to be able to perform well with really low reps.
Yeah, I also would add that I don't think I can do that 4 to 6 rep range on a movement that is short overloaded isolation movement. It needs to be set up in a manner that's more lengthened. So like a facing cable curl that's short overloaded where you're facing the machine cannot do that for 5s. It gets me nothing. Turn around, make it lengthened, face away cable curl. I can do that for 5 all day.
I've been trying to figure that out too, though. So why do I feel that way though? So think about it. I've never programmed like sets of 4 in a hip thrust or something, and it feels like when I program short overloaded stuff, I tend to bias towards just one notch above that. And like a 4 to 6 RDL, I'm like, yeah, cool, sign me up. Like I can do that. 4 to 6 lunge or split squat, like cool, no problem. But like a 4 to 6 hip extension or 4 to 6 glute bridge, is that me just misunderstanding that maybe I like short overloaded movements at higher rep ranges because I get a better pump on them, and I'm missing that pump when I'm in the
I think you have to launch the rep from the bottom to do it with heavyweight, and so it changes the rep execution pattern from what you're used to.
That's fair. Yeah, I think you could still. I think the counters, you could lower the weight then, right? But it doesn't feel, at the very least, there's something that doesn't feel great about it that has led me to continue not programming that way.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if I'm misunderstanding that. If my brain's, I usually get a really good pump on that because it's short overloaded, and then I do a set of 4, and I'm like, I didn't get a good pump. And so some subconscious me being like, oh, that's not good then. And maybe there actually is something less good about missing out on that occlusion effect of just the pushing yourself in the short overloaded movement.
Yeah.
So would like a dumbbell lateral raise be another one too that you wouldn't like?
Can't do that for 4 reps or 5 reps.
Yeah.
But you said something like a wrist height cable lateral raise. You could that feels a little bit better.
I do 5s all day on those. Yeah, I'm currently doing a 3x5. It's amazing.
And then there's practicality issues. Dumbbell lateral raise like shifts in center of gravity. Like, give me the 40s, and my delts might be able to do a couple of reps, but the amount of shifting backwards in center of gravity, about 40 pounds in the scapular plane, makes that just like not. I don't want to bother with it, but okay, wrist height lateral raise, a little bit less, a little bit more stability, a little less of an issue of the top of the range being the hardest when the weight's like furthest in front of you. Yeah, I'm with you, right? It feels great. I don't think you meet 19-year-old me who's like swinging weights around and you're going to get a bunch of really productive sets of 5. I just don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Cool. I know we're a little over time here, so really appreciate you guys' time. Always enjoy chatting with you guys. Anything coming out on either of your ends that you want to chat about or let the audience know about? And then where can they find you? I feel like at this point everybody knows, but just always want to leave that at the end.
My new podcast just dropped today.
Great.
So if you go into any of the podcast apps, it's called Life Reflected. And my first conversation is out there right now.
Sweet, man. Yeah, I have to give it a listen.
Do you think, Jeff, it was your invitation for the first podcast dropped in the mail as a guest? Or was
Dude, it got lost. I'm in a new house.
Yeah,
so
it's in the cloud somewhere, you think? No, I'm
Yeah.
pumped to listen, Brian. I'm excited for you, man. We were together, you mentioned just wanting to document things, and we talked about writing a book. And I'm not saying I don't know what your deep motivation was for the podcast, but like I can tell you wanted there's a part of you that like wants to get something else out there that's not necessarily just lifting and stuff.
Yeah.
So is this a venture into that?
Yeah, I'm working on another project too that's more surrounding this idea of like movement and its impact on the quality of life. So yeah, got two other kind of tangential things to fitness.
Good for you, man. I'm excited. I just downloaded it. So I left a 1-star review. I said, fuck this.
Anything on your end, Jordan?
No, I got a new cycle starting this weekend. I'm sure Brian's got a new cycle starting this weekend too. So join mine, not Brian's. And then
Ours starts February 17th, so you can join mine
I
as
thought we
you're
were
like
synced up.
No, we got unsynced at some point because we did some 7-week cycles in there at some point. So
The ad people told you it'd be smart to stop competing with me. Is that what-
yeah, exactly. Now I see your ads everywhere though. I see you bench press in the 80s looking swole.
Oh shit! The ad stuff cracks me up, man. Because when I first met, I know we're off time, but when I first met with those ad people, Brian, I had an idea of the ads I was seeing from you guys, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do these like stupid like POV. You just started this training, and now you're all jacked ads. And I said that to them in like a condescending way that I didn't realize was coming out condescending. I just was like, I was like, put me to work. I'm a content creator. And they were like, yeah, no problem. Meanwhile, the ads that you're seeing are like crushing, and they're like ads that like I've made that I thought were going to be like awesome. I put all this work into, nobody gives a shit. And so like they were 100% right. I like wrote them a letter. I'm like, I'm so sorry. You guys clearly know what you're doing, and I didn't know shit.
There you go.
I love it. Hey, you got to update the videos for the 90s now there. So your ads. So
Yeah, true that. Yeah, that's true.
all right, guys. Appreciate your time, man. Always fun chatting with you boys. Talk to you soon.
Gotcha.
You guys, you good, Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Hold on.